Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. I hope everybody's having a good day today. Let's see. Of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can like and share the screen, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about tonight grabbed your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions. We will do our best to answer the questions. So, Rick, how was your day today?
Not too bad. I'm just trying to share this out right now, so hopefully you can hear me and I'm not roboting too much. Just
No, actually, thus
my
far you seem
internet
to be fine.
connection isn't the great.
Yeah, you seem to be fine so
What was
far.
that?
You seem to be
Oh, that's
fine
good.
so far.
Yeah. Well, maybe fine on your end, but on my end, well, I hear myself fine, obviously, but there's a little bit of roboting on my end, which obviously must be my connection issues. But it is what it is. Okay, so
Uh,
I'm just
hello,
trying to
hello,
share this out.
sweetheart 17. Are random diseases, i.e., diabetes, a death sentence? I diabetes isn't necessarily a death sentence. I think it does for those who have it make things a little more difficult because they have to watch their sugar intake more. Um, but I don't know if it's a death sentence. You know,
And the question is, I'm not sure whether I'd even consider diabetes a random disease. Um, I'm not even. Would it be a disease too? Uh, probably by some it might be considered. I'm not sure whether medically it would be considered a disease or
mhm,
not. It's obvious, definitely a condition of some sort. But,
right.
and
Well,
hello,
it's
Elk.
what? Yeah. Hey, Elk. Hail Lord Xenu and Xena. Hail Princess Xena. Um, yeah. Well, what diabetes is, it's when your body doesn't produce enough insulin for some reason. So
Yeah,
uh, so that might be more of a condition really than a disease. But we
yeah.
digress here. So before of course before I go over what's on tap for tonight, Rick, you want to do an intro? You know the shtick, right?
Yeah, well, I am a Rick Piper of Cross Comics, as my uh, thing says there. And for those that don't know, I have a YouTube channel where, well, there's a bunch of my own comic type stuff on it, but lately I've just been doing a lot of just chill stream on Tuesday nights, talking with people in the chat and with some people on the panel. So if you want to go try and find me on YouTube and subscribe, it would be great if you could. And then Elk says diabetes is a disease. I have it. Yeah, you wouldn't panic, right, Mike? No panic if what?
Um,
I'd say.
well, first off, I don't,
Um, uh,
I don't, I don't have diabetes. I know I don't have diabetes. You know, um, I think my last blood work even indicated that. You know, I may have some high cholesterol. I have blood pressure issues,
yeah.
but other than that, aside from what I was born with, some of the issues I was born with, I'm pretty much overall fairly healthy. So, anyways,
Yeah. But as for diabetes, I know my dad has it. My mom has had it. I've known a couple other people in my life that have it too. So, you know, I just wasn't sure what it was classified medically. I,
yeah.
I'm not denying that it would be or is. It's just I just wasn't sure. enough as
anyways,
it is. I'm still
anyways,
not sure.
I
But
think enough,
anyways,
enough.
we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about diseases. So here's what's on tap for tonight. I have one article to go over. Kind of a continuation of a story we covered, I think, a few weeks ago about Roy Thomas, whether or not he should get credit. He was an editor with Marvel, also a creator himself. Um, Whether or not he should get creator credit for Wolverine. This, of course, led into the
Yeah.
big discussion on whether or not editors should be getting, creator credits. Um,
Well,
Aside from that, of
with
course,
that, and I
go
think
ahead, Rick.
one thing that I would point out with that article that we read before is, he's just not an editor just correcting stuff or whatever, making sure things are right. You know, he directed an artist and a writer to come up with a character, and he gave a lot of input in, apparently,
Mhm.
according to the article that we did read.
Yeah. So
So,
now you remember, right?
which, yeah, yeah. So obviously once he with him putting in stuff, that makes it a lot more questionable. If he's just somebody, going over the script, making sure, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and stuff like that, making sure the um I think in that's where, the difference is, but obviously there's more to this story as we read on. There's somebody's put more to the story, so I guess we will read on and find out what that
And of
is.
course, we do have the wrestling wrap up a little later on. Of course, a couple big events happened over the weekend. Uh, Rebellion, Rebellion for TNA, which marked some returns to TNA, some former talent coming back to TNA, as well as, and I guess Rick is having some technical issues again. Hopefully, that will get resolved soon enough. Um, Also, of course, last night, AEW had Dynasty. We also have, a couple quick notes on WWE. Um, yeah, you're opened up on two. I have two windows for you, or two things here. Now
Yeah,
it's down to one. Okay. So, anyways,
yeah. Have you read Barbara?
well, I was
Or,
just about to in a moment, but
oh,
also, of course, aside from the wrestling wrap up, we also have this day in each history at the very end. So let me get these comments in, then I guess we'll get to the news article. You were talking about it if some environmental things were ho- I wasn't. Somebody else was asking, but I wasn't necessarily talking about it.
wasn't it?
Going back to anime, what are you most looking forward to? I don't have anything off the top of my head I'm looking forward to. What is the anime
Um,
Oli Tonbo? I don't know. I haven't seen that one yet. But
for
anyways,
anime, probably. I'd be looking forward to whatever stuff my Hero Academia. I really like that. I haven't seen anything new from it in a while, although there probably is. I just haven't been paying attention.
well, it was on Toonami for a while there here in the States, but apparently I don't know if any new seasons are being dubbed and coming, because right now it's kind of funny because um when Toonami, they recently wrapped up Licorice Recoil, and so they decided to put a second showing. In other words, instead of just having one episode of One Piece as part of the block, now they went back to having two episodes, and there are a few shows out there that I think never got finished on Toonami that I would like to see come back. Um, I know some people are talking about. Some people are talking about. What is it?
Canceled shows?
Well, no, not canceled. Joe.
Discontinued? Or are you talking
Okay.
about
Well, My Hero
the
Academia is one
translation
of them,
stuff?
but the other one I was thinking of was uh, Black Clover. That's the other one. That one they didn't really finish, and they, from what I understand, they still had some material that they could have. I think what they did is they just shifted it over to another streaming site or whatever, and not on Toonami. But anyways, so let's get into the article then. This one article we're gonna go over tonight.
Yeah, and hopefully I don't have too many problems tonight with my internet. It's being a bit choppy, but at least on my end, hopefully everybody else can hear me all right.
Yeah, more or less. I think you were choppy like for a brief moment, like a few minutes ago, but other than that, you're pretty much fine now. So let's see. So there we go. So let's get into this article then. Kind of a follow up to something we covered, I think a couple weeks ago or something like that. So more on Roy Thomas controversial co-creator credit on Wolverine. Article by Avi Green, published today. Oh, here we go. Oh, so I find the cursor here. Okay, there we go. All right, so around the time the issue of Roy Thomas giving the assignment of creating Wolverine in the Bronze Age first came up, Forbes also interviewed Christine Vallada, Len Wayne's widow, who doesn't approve of Thomas' wish to get his own credit as the editor who oversaw the development of Logan. Um, and what's odd here is that she seems to be claiming it's not about money in a bizarre reflection of what Thomas said. So, and this is to the Forbes article here. This is This is now Avi referencing the Forbes article. Christine Vallada, an entertainment and copyright attorney in Los Angeles, specializing in creator rights issues, took exception to many of the points made in the story. Vallada, who met Wayne in 1989 and married him in 1991, managed her late husband's estate, which has been receiving both credit and financial compensation from Disney, owner of Marvel, since 2014. Wayne himself died in 2017. Quote, I'm not privy to what financial arrangements might be, in brackets, with Thomas, and I don't particularly care, unquote. Vallada said in a phone interview on April 2nd, quote, this is not about finances. This is about stolen valor. This frankly calls my husband a liar for his entire career, unquote. Vallada says Wayne remained consistent in his account of the character's creation since the beginning, while acknowledging that Thomas had assigned him to introduce a Canadian character named Wolverine in The Incredible Hulk, which Wayne was writing. Wayne said he did all the original research that shaped Wolverine's powers and personality. Wayne, who studied art in college, claimed he even contributed to John Romita's character design. So that's pretty far. Let's see. Just coming back for a moment. Okay, so. Oh, anyways, this last point is disputed by Herb Trimpe, the artist who drew the first Wolverine stories, who died in 2015. In an interview that took place in 2012, Trimpe said, quote, I was in the office a good part of the time, and I was there when John, in brackets Romita, was working on the model for the character. The way it worked was Roy Thomas came up with a concept. It was his. He came up with the name of the character, Wolverine, and he handed it directly over to John Romita in the bullpen to develop a character sheet, who he gave to Len Wayne, who was the writer at the time. And I know one of the points that we had made quite a few times is basically most of the, I think all the people who were there, or just about all the people who were there at the time of his creation,
Yeah.
have all died off. Um,
Yeah.
so
Um,
that
but even I'm not sure who's speaking
like
here
Roy Thomas,
exactly
of course.
because
Yeah.
uh, but uh, but is it the wife that's speaking here saying what
Well,
she
she's the
was
one. Yeah,
told or whatever
the wife, Christine Vallada, here is the one. I guess countering.
in the bold?
Yeah, countering Thomas's claims here. Um, Trimp continued, quote, I don't want to take away anybody's ability to make a few bucks, but it. Okay, there's a little editing error there. Roy's concept and John's character design. The writer, in my opinion, gave the character a voice and actually collaborated with the artist in terms of bringing the character to life, which is no small thing, and it's not really the originator of the concept. Vallada disagrees. She said she has great respect for editors, but said that you can never compare what they do in the course of their staff jobs with the toil that writers and artists put in bringing ideas to life. Quote, it's their sweat and blood that goes into the creation, while editors go home and collect their paychecks, unquote, she said. Quote, it's simply not true that Roy was in any way, shape, or form a co-creator of the character. Well, I don't know. If you're looking at it, if Thomas was the one who came up with the original concept, then an argument, I
Yeah.
guess, could be made. An argument could, if he's the one who came up with the idea, okay,
Yeah.
we want a Canadian hero, name of Logan / Wolverine.
Oh,
If he came up with a basic character design and then handed it off to the artist to kind of draw that out, then an argument maybe could be made that maybe Thomas does deserve
yeah,
co-creator.
and I can definitely concur with that. Like he came up with the name, um, Canadian. Now, yeah, that's very very broad. I forget what else it said that he came up with, if anything, besides the name and Canadian. Was there any other concepts?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly not. Um, It's hard to say for that. Well, like I can't remember what's been said or not said, and I'm only half hearing everything because of my internet connection. But
Mm-hmm.
if what he says is true, yeah, sure. Um, the writer has something to do, obviously, too. But it's like Stan Lee, when he's creating Spider-Man or whatever. Yeah, he's created Spider-Man on his own. He got, an artist involved for the look, obviously. But, all the villains that are created along the way, um, is Stan just the editor, the writer, all these villains that they're creating along the way. Is he the editor? Well, if he's the editor and writer, it's hard to say. I'm not sure what he was on those Spider-Man comics besides the writer back then when Spider-Man was first come up with. But you know, I think there's at a point. I'm not sure where when he became editor, what he's credited for various characters. If he's like told somebody to make a character, is he credited with that at all? You know, Yeah, and I'm just using Stan because it's somebody most people know that, he created quote unquote a lot of Marvel characters, so
Mhm.
especially a lot of the famous ones anyways. And yeah, he's credited usually with an artist, so
Yeah,
it's I don't know what to say. It sounds like Roy was very much involved, a little bit involved. I'm not sure whether I should say very much, but somewhat involved for sure. Anyways,
yeah. As you were talking, I was listening. It says as you were talking, I was sent a link to. I sent the invite or the well, not the studio invite, but the YouTube invite to RJ. Suggesting he might want to watch because I know RJ would probably know more about this stuff than I. Obviously I would. So,
mm,
um,
yeah.
but anyways, getting back to the article here. Let's see.
Well, I was just going to say, it sounds like she's thinking of an editor in the way that I think most people do think of an editor, that they just, correct the grammar and, maybe say, oh,
Yeah,
this
kind of
piece
like
of
what
art
you were
needs to
talking
be
about
correct.
earlier. Yeah, like
Yeah. Now, if he depends on how much of a hands-on editor he is and, getting new characters in, a comic, was this the writer's idea, to add this character? But it sounds like it was Roy's idea, not the writer's.
mm,
So
but
at least with what we're hearing.
okay, but here's the last part of her statement here on this. To me, co-creator means that he either contributed to writing the story or he contributed artwork, and he didn't do either. He made suggestions as an editor does. Partially true. Well, I mean, but according to Thomas, he kind of came up with the original. He kind of came up with the original concept there. So
Yeah, because if he hadn't even come up with the concept, say I want a character called Wolverine that's a Canadian to be put into the Hulk comic, the writer wouldn't have even come up with the thought of doing this without. So yeah, technically it says, yeah, I think it's more than a suggestion at that point, but you know,
well, I think this next paragraph here has Avi, I guess, responding to what Miss, as he calls her, Mrs. Villata, um, pointing out here. So this is Avi speaking now. It sounds like Mrs. Villata, regrettably, is not willing to recognize that an editor can come up with a quote unquote rough sketch of the idea they'd like to see realized and assign them to official writers and artists to develop, which does kind of sound like exactly what happened here. He
yeah,
basically had a rough sketch or rough idea of what he wanted, and then just handed it off to writers and artists to kind of
run with it.
materialize what was in his head. You know.
Yeah, and Elk says, from the little I have heard suggesting elements of a story's grant to ownership rights, the term suggestion is a red herring. Well, it depends on what you consider suggestions. Like he's telling them to make a character, who's Canadian named Wolverine. I'm not sure whether that was a suggestion. I'm not sure what you mean, but well, I think her term suggestion is maybe a red herring. If a person originates the elements of the story they are adopted, that gives you ownership rights. So I think, you know, in this case, Elk might be agreeing with Abby, and
Yeah,
I think I
it
am really
sounds like
agreeing with
sounds like
Abby.
it. It
You know,
sounds like in this particular case, Elk may be agreeing with Avi right there, and I think
yeah,
it makes
and
more sense
I think
that
I
way
am
too.
too.
It makes more logical sense that way too. I mean, um, but anyways, continuing on here. Granted, she's trying to avoid making it sound like she only cares about money, which shouldn't be everything. Even so, it's sad Velada doesn't want to acknowledge editors can and do deserve credit for pitching ideas that might not have come about had it not been for their thinking.
Yeah, and I sort of pointed at that myself, like, if he never said about creating this character of Wolverine and, the little bit of detail that he gave for him, whatever that may be, they would have never created a character called Wolverine to put in the comic.
Yeah. So
So,
I think that's Roy Thomas right there. Now Roy Thomas, remember when they created Wolverine, this is back in the 70s. So this is like 6 decades ago, 50 years ago basically. But
yeah.
let's see. But since the issue of Valor comes up, how would Velada feel if any of Wayne's creations suffered the same kind of woke abuse Thomas and even Bill Fingers did? Um, and of course, they're going back to Bill. Well, Bill Finger, aside from Batman, Bill Finger, I believe, was also one of the guys who co-created Alan Scott Green Lantern as well, if I remember correctly. So why? How about the time when Brian Bendis made particularly awful use of Wolverine in the Marvel crossover tales he'd engineered over 15 years ago, or even the time when Logan was put in a comics grave for nearly 3 years just several years ago. If
Uh,
Logan's undergone, oh, go ahead.
uh, Elk is saying yes. Before agreeing with Avi, I don't know if I agree. Claiming you are a creator after most others involved are dead, I find self-serving at best. Yeah, I agree with that. That is definitely a thing that should be considered. Although apparently in the last article that we read, he did claim that he was making these um, claims years ago while the people were alive, and that they were sort of agreeing with him or agreed with him. I forget exactly um, what the article concretely said uh, about the previous article said about what they said, but that's what I remember. And Timothy, of course, is here and saying, "What's up?" We're
Hey,
reading a
Tim.
follow-up
How about,
article too.
go ahead, Rick.
Go ahead.
You started. So.
Well, I was just going to let him know that we are reading a follow-up article to a previous article that we read about Roy Thomas and whether he deserves creator credit in the creation of Wolverine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the sum of it. So,
And we're
anyways,
at If Logan.
so now, anyways, engineered over 15 years ago. So Logan was put in. Okay. Just several years ago. If Logan's undergone any kind of abuse by Marvel writers that does more harm than good, isn't Velada disappointed with that? It's hard to say you care about Valor when you don't say a word about dignity for both the writer's efforts and the creation to boot. So I guess this
Timothy
go.
says, "Can he prove?" What was that, Mike?
Well, go ahead and go ahead and say.
Oh, I
So
thought you were saying something before I was reading.
I
I was just
was,
going to
but
say,
then you
Timothy.
started reading off something, so I figured, okay, I'll stop and let you. But can he
Well,
prove it?
yeah, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can you prove it? If not, he needs to zip it. Well, he's claiming he came up with the original concept and handed it off to the writers to flesh it out. That's basically, and apparently, as Rick pointed out earlier in the previous article we read about, um, he'd basically been making that claim since back in the very beginning. Velada here is this article is more about the response to Thomas's claims. This isn't
It's
really
about what,
Thomas much speaking this time. That was the previous article we did on it, but
and this is
there's
about
more
the wife
Velada's
of one of the
counter.
creators that is dead speaking.
Yeah, it sounds like the lawyers will be going over the evidence one way or another. This is all about money.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I would say that too, although not everybody's trying to claim it's not.
mhm. Either way, it belongs to Marvel now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, this is true, Tom, Tim. I mean, not Tom. I don't know why I called you Tom. There's only one letter difference, but but the thing is, these creators, of course, do get credit and royalty either to themselves or to their families. If they're dead, so as much as they don't um, um, say it's not about money, some are trying to say it's about valor, and I can give his wife's point. Valor, yeah, she's talking about the dignity of her husband, so not the dignity of Tom, or the valor of Tom.
Well, I highlight that 'cause I figured you would probably want to.
Kim says, Tom, Tom, the nerve. But I know why I said Tom now because the guy that's in the article that is claiming um that had claimed this in the first article. His name was Tom, so that's why I got confused. Tom and Tim.
Well, Timothy creator. So
Tom.
L and Goodnight Spoon is here. Hey, Goodnight Spoon. And just a friendly reminder, of course, guys, if you haven't already, if you guys can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and we'll try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. So,
Good
Goodnight Spoon
evening.
now is getting into the act.
Hello, Good Night Spoon. How are you tonight?
Uh, Back at you, elk. May 1,000 gypsy skanks tickle your taint. Oh boy. Okay.
Okay, so
Anyway.
here. Okay, here's we're reading some more of the article
Yeah.
with what's his name? Tim says, Good Night Spoon says, I am alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're going into some more of what Vala said. One of the creators, I think the writer,
Yeah.
wife
Well, yeah.
is.
Christine Vallada is the wife of the writer Len Wayne. Len Wayne, I guess the writer for Wolverine, the writer creator for Wolverine was Len Wayne, and
Well, well, technically, it would be the writer of the Incredible Hulk back then because that's where he first appeared, and this is what we're.
yeah,
So
and
this is
then the
the issue that
artist
we're
was John
talking about.
Romita Jr., I believe. So, anyways,
Yeah.
uh, she
But Tim
cited.
says, "Oh hi." Hold on one sec. We got a few more comments here. Tim says, "Oh hi, good night, spleen." And good night, spoon says, "I have a question about the topic of discussion." Okay. Um, shoot. And then Elk says, I've never wanted a casual joke to become more true. I think he means not true more. And then Mr. Foolery says, "Good night, spoon."
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah, Mr. Fuller. Yeah. So, well, if you got
Okay,
a
let's
question,
start.
you're more than welcome to ask it. I guess Rick will let
Well,
me know.
let's get through this portion while he writes it down.
All right.
He cried.
So, going back to the Forbes article now, of course, she cited the example of Wayne himself, whose career included several notable editorial roles. Quote, the list of characters created while Wayne was editor in chief at Marvel is several pages long. Um, Bellotta said, quote, of course, he was editor of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen at DC, in brackets in 1986. He would never dream of taking co creator status on anything he edited, no matter what he contributed to the process.
Yeah, but therein lies the thing is, I'm not sure too much about the Watchmen, but if, like I'll take Stanley for an example. From what I've heard, Stanley went to his boss the editor or whoever was in charge, and he said, "I've got a concept for a character called Spider-Man. This is what he's about. Can I do it?" And the editor or who his boss said at first, whenever he's like, "Are you crazy?" He said, "Sidekicks aren't teenagers or sidekicks. They're not the actual main hero." And but if he let him go with it, of course, and it was put into Amazing Fantasy, and then we know what happened there. But this is a different concept. This is the editor going to the writer and saying, a writer and artist saying, "Hey, I want this character in the comic." So that's a different two different scenarios in the character being created, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or a character being created. And if he's going there and saying, "I want this character," and maybe it's not super fleshed out, but it gets
Mm-hmm.
fleshed out in comics. I can see, the point of Tom. Anyways, Good Night Spoon says, "What do they throw into the well? In the good sun staring Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin." I
I've
have
never
no
seen A
idea.
Good Son, so I wouldn't know that one. Seems like Elk really did block me. Um, Rick, okay, Rick, you might want to read this one.
Rick, please extend my apologies to Elk for not spoiling the Fallout TV show. Or I think you mean for spoiling the TV show. Next time, I promise I will try. This woman is discussing red herrings about the editor's position. That is irrelevant. If you uh, if you originate elements of a story, they are adopted. You gain some ownership. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I would agree, especially for the character. Like, of course, if they were just creating a story itself with, uh, existing characters, sure, and a suggestion for what to happen in the story, that would be different. He gets his credit for editor of the book. Fine. Everybody's just doing it. The guy gets the credit for writing, the guy gets credit for doing the art. But this is the creation of a character, and he's specifically saying put this character in. Maybe it's not as fleshed out as it gets fleshed out in the book, but it seems like if it wasn't for him, the character wouldn't even be there. If you're a
Uh,
dog walker, cameraman, or editor, yeah. Rick obviously has not seen Fallout if he thinks I spoiled it. Uh, how do I unblock Spoon? Um, you probably have to go into your YouTube studio or something along that lines. Probably somewhere in the background. Either that, because obviously you can't hit the three dots because you
well,
can't see him.
where does he have him blocked? Does he have him blocked on YouTube, or does he have him blocked on?
Yeah. Well, I think it's on YouTube.
Because
Uh,
if it's on social media, all you have to do is just go to your thing and just unblock him. But basically, it shouldn't be that. Even if it's on YouTube, it shouldn't really be that hard. Just
Yeah,
um,
well, he's got to go in the background of his YouTube, either YouTube Studio or whatever, or settings or something like that.
yeah, it'd
I
be
can't
in the
remember exactly it,
yeah.
because obviously he's not going to be able to see him in the chat. They're not going to be able to see each other in the chat. I don't think because of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Good Night Spoon says, "Rick, don't correct me. I said what I meant." Okay, okay. I am a dog walker, cameraman, and editor. YouTube. I'll go to my thing. Like on YouTube itself, if you click there, hopefully I don't.
Well, okay. So if you go to your
YouTube
if
Studio.
you go to your channel page, right? It should lead you into a section where like there's a bunch of different stuff in there, including like list of names or people that you basically have blocked. Okay. All you have to do is go into your settings, go into that section, and unblock him.
Yeah, hopefully we're. I know we're probably not the best at describing this. Also, Rick, why is your channel blacklisted? What do you mean, my channel blacklisted? I don't know what you mean. Or blacklisted? Blacklisted? Is my channel blacklisted?
Shadow ban.
My channel is shadow banned? I didn't even know it was shadow banned. I don't know. YouTube. Maybe I've done something to get shadow banned or what they consider something.
Anyways, let's get back to the article here. We're already at the 41. So this article took us even quite a bit longer than we thought. It's already 41 minutes into the show here.
It says buried 30 feet deep in search results. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Point, if Wayne didn't pitch the idea himself and it really was Moore's idea to write Watchmen with DC's approval, then this is hardly the same thing. But next comes something that makes it hard for me to take her side. Quote, seeing Roy Thomas's name as a co-creator makes me sick to my stomach, unquote, she said. Quote, the man should have stayed in his lane as the editor, taking his accolades for that, and not try to usurp credit that he's not due and that he has not earned. If I sit back and let this roll, by where will it stop? It's only going to get worse, unquote. Vallada says it is not too late for Disney and Marvel to walk back this move. Quote, look, what NBC Universal did last week, in brackets, reversing course after the hiring RNC chair Rona McDaniel caused an uproar, unbracketed. They should say, look, we made a mistake, and people will be very impressed that they were able to acknowledge that in the name of truth, unquote. Yeah, I wonder about.
I have no idea.
Ronna McDaniel, she's the former RNC chair. She's the RNC chair who basically just got outed by Trump or ousted by Trump, and got his daughter Lara elected RNC co-chair. So, so, what's this? And this is Avi speaking now. Something that reeks of political bias? Sadly enough, I don't know if Thomas is a Republican per se, but if that's got anything to do with Vallada's complaints, to the point she'd run the gauntlet of being rude, then I can't sympathize with her. Besides, it's unclear if she cares about artistic integrity, which seems lacking in the whole affair. So, what good does this do?
First of all, I think she does care about artistic integrity. She's just, I think, blinded, for lack of a better way of saying it, to what things, how things work or should work. I'm not sure how to put it exactly. And I could be wrong, but I think Abby's just catching on to a point that she was just trying to use an example. I don't think it was the best example, although I can't really. I think I know what that is, but I can't really remember exactly. So it doesn't. It's probably still, even with the little bit I know, I don't think it's the best example.
Yeah,
Anyways, good night. Good night, Spoon says, I wish Tom was still here. I meant to
mention
that
I wish Tom was still
Meant
here. I meant to mention that I saw the story about um, the butt stuff he was talking about. Um,
and then
oh, I think what he's referring to is when we were reading the. I think what Goodnight Spoon might be referring to when we were reading when we were reading
comics the other
when
week.
we were reading Fawcett comics the other night, and the whole little like dirty joke that was the innuendo there. But anyways, I apologize
Yeah,
to a good spoon night. When I figured out how to unblock, when I figure out how to unblock him, I will. Right now, I'm using Android, and my cats are sleeping on my computer. Hmm. Uh, anyways, let's get back to the article here. Here's another Forbes article about veteran Thomas's role in the creation of Wolverine 5 decades ago and his reasons for development. So this is actually from a Forbes article that was done back when all this was going on, I guess, when this all originated. Okay, so in 1974, Thomas was working under Stan Lee, who was Marvel's publisher at the time. According to Roy, the impetus for Wolverine's creation came from the fact that roughly 5 to 10% of Marvel readers were Canadian. Thomas wanted them to have their own hero to root for. Roy said he was thinking of animals that live in both Canada and the United States, to liken Marvel's first Canadian character to in both name and demeanor. Two animals stood out: a badger and a wolverine. Quote, I thought about the two of them, and badger, well, it's a good enough name, as a matter of fact. There was a character, an imitation of Wolverine, started a year or two later after he became big, who was called the Badger, and ran for quite a few years, unquote, Thomas told me over Zoom in late February. Quote,
and
but
Goodnight Spoon says apology accepted. Also, I was referring to the story about Dr. Mephisto putting CGI butts on actress Ella Purnell. Purnell?
all
Yeah.
right. Anyways, and back to the article here. Quote, but I just thought badger, it sounds like a verb. Like when you badger somebody, yeah. It kind of means to annoy, you badger somebody. In fact, it's also used in court a lot. If you've ever seen any court dramas, you hear them
Yeah.
badgering the witness.
Yeah.
uh, so, um, and so it wasn't quite as good a name, unquote. Um, Roy said, quote, and Wolverine had that kind of wolfy sound, um, and the V in it, um, it was just something about it, unquote. So now going back to Avi here speaking, I wonder if this helped Mike Barron to create Badger the following decade, since the character name was left easily accessible. I assume that's what Thomas was thinking about, though it took nearly a decade after Wolverine's introduction in the pages of Hulk for Barron to first produce Badger at the original Capital First Comics. But honestly,
Now I
Thomas's.
must say,
Go ahead.
I was going to say two things. The thing is, Wolverine and Badger, because they're both animals, they would be names that you could be use as public domain to create a character. Of course, you could not create the exact same thing, you know, obviously Badger when Mike Barron created it was very different. He was close enough that somebody could see similarities, but he was also probably made enough different that he couldn't get sued by Marvel.
Hmm.
And then we got Good
Yeah.
Night Spoon says in 20 years and we still don't realize monkeys shouldn't have four asses. Okay.
And then what would be more relevant to ownership is that um, the the claimant was working for hire at Marvel when he claims he made the additions to the story.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about what we said or what we read. So,
Okay, so anyways, on with the article here. But honestly, Thomas's motivation for creating Logan has since unfortunately been exploited by tons of liberal propagandists to produce all sorts of leftist social justice propaganda under the claim that, quote, everybody should have their own hero, unquote, even if it means basing their creation upon ideology rather than nationality. And now, look what kind of woke damage has occurred since. Make Wolverine Canadian if you must, but it shouldn't be simply because there's plenty of folks in the Great White North who read Marvel's output. It should be based on entertainment value, and without it, that's exactly why Logan's been brought down as a concept since along with sales figures. That's obviously now back to the Forbes article here. After Thomas had the name, he remembers going to one of Marvel's top writers for the story, Len Wein, who was writing The Incredible Hulk at the time. Roy previously wrote for the title. Quote, I called in Len and I told him, in bracket, 5 things, unquote, Thomas said. Quote, I said, in smaller quotes, I want this character in right away, smaller quote, because I just wanted to establish it soon. I said, in smaller quotes, he's Canadian. He's called Wolverine, and like a Wolverine, in small quotes, it's a small animal. So I wanted, in brackets, him to be short. Quote, most of the heroes are all 6 feet, 6.5 feet. I wanted this to be a short hero. Um, and the other thing was that Wolverines are especially noticed badgers that could have worked for it too. They're noticed for the Wolverine, in particular, in brackets, noticed for attacking animals up to 5, 10, or more times their own size. Um, I mean, they don't just defend themselves; they sometimes attack. They just they're just vicious creatures. Um, so I wanted him to be especially ill-tempered and kind of fierce, unquote. Kind of reminds me of some of the scenes I've seen where Wolverine and Sabretooth go at it. And from both the original, from the X-Men animated series back in the 90s, as well as Evolution. Um, Thomas trusted Len's writing ability and left him alone while he crafted the story. That trust would yield some key details to the character that fans still cherish 50 years later. Quote, Len on his own, besides the kind of background of this Canadian secret organization that was in charge of Wolverine and so forth, as Weapon X, we were talking about Alpha Flight, I believe, is what they're talking about, kind of thing. He came up with that, and he came up with the idea, in brackets, the claws were made of adamantium, which is the hardest substance known, unquote, Roy recalled. Um, uh, you went out again, huh? It
yeah,
took me.
yeah. We go. Yeah, you know my internet. Anyways, we got a few more bleh things here. Uh, Elk says, and what Marvel contracts with editors says about ownership of creations.
Well, going back up here, if
if those
Marvel
are where
says
the
they own outright everything it written and editors create, they can do that. Okay.
yeah
Are we reading anti-Canadian propaganda? Good night, Spoonhead. I'm confused that what this article is about. It's kind of a follow up to an article we did before, talking
yeah
again
that you
about
weren't
whether
here.
or not Roy Thomas deserves creator credit because he was an editor who helped with Wolverine. He didn't actually he did not well he didn't write the story per se or do the artwork, but basically according to him he came up with the basic concept. He came up with the rough sketch and then handed it off to Len Wein and John Romita to flesh it out. Um, if those
Yeah,
were
and then these articles have been whether he should, get compensate creator credit and possibly compensation for that, or is well, I guess him since he's alive, but
Yeah. If those were the employment terms, if the terms included financial payment for creations, that's another salary. Um, Wolverine, Wolverines are scary looking. I ran into bears weekly where I used to live. Wolverines still scared the the feces out of
crap
me.
out of me. Yeah, and Wolverines are known to be able to take down bears too, I believe. So, they're
Yeah.
small, furry animals, yet, the as it said, very vicious, and they can take down animals way bigger than them. Because of how fierce and sharp their claws are and stuff like that. You know.
Yeah, so I guess it was a good thing I chose only one story because we're gonna still be at it a bit with the wrestling rabbit too because of the two events. Um,
Yeah.
but this one's taking us up quite a bit to get through here. Quote:
Yeah, we've
I
been
didn't
on other stuff.
quote I didn't have anything to do with that, but I was particularly happy since I had invented adamantium for an Avengers story a couple years earlier, and so I thought, quote, well, that's cool, unsmaller quote. But that was up to Len. Once I did my little bit, I was content to have him do the rest of it. In Avi speaking here, on adamantium metals, yes, that was put to use in stories involving Ultron. So Thomas does have something that can help strengthen a claim to giving the assignment as editor to a writer artist. And then going back to the article here, Thomas also trusted Wayne's ability to edit. He primarily left the revisions up to Len as well. Quote, I kind of let Len do his thing, and probably every word in there is entirely his, unquote, Roy said. Quote, and he worked, of course, with the artist who was then drawing the Hulk, Herb Trimp, um, who I always have in brackets credited. I know Len did. A co-creator, kind of in parentheses Wolverine, because you draw the first story, you have to do so many things. Sometimes he gets left off the list of creators. But I feel the guy who actually drew the first story and sets up all things has to be counted too. Um,
So
on
does the artist of the Hulk story get credit as a Wolverine creator? I'm not sure. I don't know who's getting the credit for the artistic part, of him. Like was there somebody else that did the you know artistic credit, before it got put in the Hulk? I'm not sure whether I'd count that or not myself. If the character's been come up with, visually beforehand, I wouldn't necessarily just because you first draw him in the story doesn't mean you should get a creator credit if he's been created by an artist before that, although he hasn't been in the story. But that's not what this article is about. So that's just a
Yeah. So, anyways,
side.
back to the article here. Quote: So it was really a kind of committee. I came first, but then you had John, you had Len, and you had Herb Trimp. Maybe Stan, in parentheses Lee, was the only person who wasn't involved. He finally saw a cover thing. He said in smaller quote, "Yeah, that's good," on smaller quote. That was it, because he wasn't intended to be a big character. Um, let's see. So, The Incredible Hulk, number 181, is now considered a holy grail comic, with even low grades commanding thousands of dollars. And number 180, with the cameo, demands a pretty penny these days as well. The first full appearance of Wolverine in number 181, published in November 1974. So I'm guessing he's saying that was the on sale date. So that would have been the cover
Yeah.
date, what, maybe January or February of 75, I guess.
Yeah.
Though Thomas notes back then it was customary for a book to be in stores about 2 months before the pub date.
So we got Elk saying, "Hail, Sir Spoony," and then Goodnight Spoon saying, "Hi, Elk." So they're unblocked. Elk's unblocked. Goodnight Spoon says, "Did you enjoy Fallout?" Elk says, "It depends on the policy and contracts Marvel has." Yeah, for sure. Obviously, that does a major consideration for sure. I would agree, but I guess we're we're not really talking legally or whatever the policies. We're just talking what should be, I guess, in a sense. Who should be credited or who shouldn't be. You know, I'm not sure what the right word I was going to be. I guess
Well, I think
you can say
the
morally or
article
whatever.
primarily the main gist of the whole situation is whether or not editors should be credited, and it depends upon what they contribute. If they came up with a rough sketch, I think most people would generally agree that yeah, they should get some creator credit. But if all they did was your typical editing duty of just making suggestions here and there, or little tidbits here and there, then maybe not as much. But I think in this case, most people generally agree that Thomas probably should be getting credit because he was the one who came up with the rough idea. He just simply handed it off to
John Romita and Len.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I would also say because with what the article thing before, John Romita is, I guess, the guy that came up with the initial concept of what Wolverine would look like, from what I get from what was said. So I don't think the Trimp guy who just simply drew him in the Hulk for the first time should get any credit. It's not like he came up with the basic look of the character, shall we say?
mhm,
You know,
mhm.
is he's just copying basically what he's been given. So I wouldn't say that he deserves a creator credit myself personally. But anyways,
All right.
Elk says yes, I like Fall. It was a solid 7 out of 10, but because it was made post 2020, it isn't terrible. It gets a 9. And then he asks, "Did you like it?" Goodnight Spoon. Goodnight Spoon says, "I did for the most part. I am only a fan of the New Vegas, so I'm excited to see what may come in the future." Goodnight Spoon then says, "Also, I was never a fan of Guggens, but the series proved me how good of an actor he really has been." And then Elk says, "Hollywood screenwriters get in these legal arguments all the time, but it is covered by common law precedents because of the freelancers, or covered by SAG
SAG
AFTRA
AFTRA.
uh,
SAG AFTRA
con.
contract. In other words, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Theatrical Actors. That's
And
uh,
I obviously did not pronounce it good. Good night's moon, that word.
yeah. All right.
Anyways,
So
up with
anyway,
the article.
back to the article. So I'm honestly irked every time I see an emphasis on back issues sold on the speculator market. This is Avi speaking again. Instead of how they've since become available in trade collections, paperback, and hardcover. And it makes no difference that Forbes is a business magazine. That aside, would Vallada have had any complaints about the late Trimp being given clear credit for his role as artist in Wolverine's creation if Trimp hadn't received it properly? If not, then again, it becomes a case of selfishness. I do recall, though, that the late Steve Ditko had fallouts with Lee in past decades over how he was credited as a creating artist for Spider-Man, even taking issue with Lee's statement he considered Ditko his co-creator. In parentheses, he said he takes issues with the word consider. In parentheses, I think Ditko was overreacting, and it's sad because it was making far too much of a fuss over something I'm sure Ditko was given residuals over as time went by, and Jim Shooter did make an effort, however flawed, to ensure creators got certain residuals based on use of characters when he was at Marvel's EIC, when he was Marvel's EIC, executive in charge. Stephen A. Ditko, 1927 to 2018, which would have made him 91.
Yeah.
So, I suppose the best way to give writers credit is if they receive first billing, the artist second, and the editor third or fourth. But to say editors aren't allowed even remote credit will only next lead to situations where even the inkers, colorists, and letterers won't get any either. And there's doubtless plenty of those kind of employees from decades past who deserve credit of their own for bringing these characters to light. To say Marvel fans still cherish key um, key details about Logan 50 years later, however, ignores that today, after so much deconstruction by woke writers and editors, there's not much left in terms of key details that anybody can appreciate. Um, when bad writing and art become the norm, it's hard to appreciate anything going forward.
Yeah, like I don't think an inker or whatever, unless they actually came up with the character concept or whatever, something actually in the carrying of the character. If they're just going over the lines the penciler has done, and even then, obviously I think inkers should get credit for their inking, but not in a character creation, maybe in the creation of the comic book, which that is by saying they're the inker, but you know, I just believe the people that are key in the character creation should be, it's like, should we give for all the, revisions to, Superman or Batman or any of the characters that have been done over the years or the add major stuff? Should they get character create credit for the characters? No. Otherwise, things are just going to go too crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the end of that article. I mean, that was a pretty interesting article. It did spark quite a bit of
Yeah.
discussion and debate there, about that
Yeah.
issue. So, um, anyways,
And then we do have a few comments that we might want to catch up on with before wrestling wrap up. Alex says, if you are working for someone, they own what you create unless otherwise is specified in your employment contract. True. What I like best are the diesel punk aesthetics and the alt history. That's the same for Fallout. So I want a gold and blue Vault Tech coffee mug. That would be a good mug, says Goodnight Spoon. Elk says Amazon is selling Fallout mugs for 50 bucks, no less, and they only have shot glasses with a simple Vault Tech logo seen on screen. Cool. I'm going to custom order a mug for $30 or so from Calf Press. Okay. Good night, Spoon Fest. Be right back. I gotta go shopping for mugs. Hashtag unrelated.
All right. So, anyways.
Okay, on with the wrestling wrap up.
All right. So, as I said, a couple of big events happened over the weekend. TNA's Rebellion and AEW's Dynasty. So, Rebellion happened on Saturday. Dynasty happened last night, of course, and we'll talk a little bit about WWE stuff as well. So, let me just first off going back to Saturday and going back to so on the pre-show for Rebellion, and once I get there, so the countdown to Rebellion saw on the countdown or the pre-show to Rebellion, the opening match saw ABC Ace Austin and Chris Bay team with Leon Slater to defeat the Rascals trio of Myron Reed, Trey Miguel, and Zachary Wentz. In the only title change of the entire night, Laredo Kid defeated Crazy Steve to become the new TNA Digital Media champion. And then Spitfire of Danny Luna and Jody Threat with Rancid's Lars Fredrickson in their corner retained the TNA Knockouts World Tag Team title over the team of Decay of Havoc and Rosemary. Now, that was the pre-show. Now on to the main show. On the main show started out with Mustafa Ali retaining the X Division title over Jake Something, which was said to be a pretty good match. Then Rich Swann defeated Joe Hendry with the help of Sean Merriman coming out of the crowd to join up with AJ Francis and Rich Swann. And the Full Metal Mayhem match between the two TNA originals, Frankie Kazarian defeated Eric Young. Making his return to TNA after being let go a few months ago by AEW, Mike Santana would, in his first match back with TNA, would defeat former Impact World Champion Steve Macklin. Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers of the System, with Alicia Edwards in their corner, defeated the team of Speedball Mountain, Speedball Mike Bailey, and Mustache Mountain Trent Seven. In a last man standing match, two-time TNA World Heavyweight Champion Josh Alexander defeated Hammerstone. Jordan Grace retained the Knockout World title over Steph DeLander in a match that saw the good hands of Jason Hotch and John Schuyler stand in for Matt Cardona, who recently was injured on an indie show. And Cone come out to try to hurt Jordan Grace, only to be saved by PCO and the returning Sami Callihan to TNA. And the main event saw Moose retain the world title over Nick Nemeth. In the post match, saw the return of Matt Hardy to TNA as his broken Matt Hardy character. So that's all from that. Then then of course moving on to getting ready to move on to what happened on Dynasty last night on AEW. Not to be confused with the nighttime soap opera, by the way. Talking about AEW.
You knew I was going to say something, didn't you?
Yeah, I figured somebody was going to be saying something. I didn't know it was going to be you. But on their pre-show, 0 Hour, and of course, Dynasty was held from the Chavis Arena in St. Louis. In the opening match, Trent Beretta defeated Matt Sydal on the pre-show. Orange Cassidy and Katsuyori Shibata defeated Shane Taylor Promotions duo of Lee Moriarty and Shane Taylor. And in a unification match for the AEW World Trios and Ring of Honor World Six-Man Tag Championships, the Bullet Club Gold of Jay White and the Gun Clubs, Austin Colt and Gunn, defeated Billy Gunn and the Acclaimed of Anthony Bowens and Max Caster to unify the two six-man titles.
Night, Elk.
Good night, Rick and Mike. Good night. Also, and then on the main show, which saw a few different title changes. Let's see. Well, the opener saw Kazuchika Okada retain the Continental title over Pac. The House of Black of Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews defeated the team of Ring of Honor World Champion Mark Briscoe, TNT Champion Adam Copeland, and New Japan Strong Openweight Champion Eddie Kingston. Willow Nightingale defeated Julia Hart to become the new AEW TBS champion in a house rules match. Roderick Strong retained the international title over Kyle O'Reilly. Chris Jericho defeated Hook for the FTW title in an FTW rules match. Tony Storm retained the AEW Women's World title over Thunder Rosa. In the Battle of the Best, Will Ospreay defeated Bryan Danielson in a match that saw Danielson apparently get hurt, but this now being said, but according to WrestleMania, the injury was a work injury, worked injury as opposed to a legit, more of a shoot or legit injury. In the finals of the tournament to crown new AEW World Tag Team titles and the first 3-time AEW World Tag Team Champions, as competed in a ladder match, the Young Bucks were able to get up the ladders to collect the belt to become the new AEW World Tag Team Champions over FTR. And then we have a new AEW World Champion too. It's Swerve Strickland defeated Samoa Joe. So there we go with the results. Now for WWE news, kind of give you guys a heads up on what's going to be happening on tonight's Raw. Tonight's Monday Night Raw here. Let's get to that in a moment here. Those who might be interested. Scheduled for tonight's Raw as soon as I get there. Let's see. So tonight's Raw, we'll see in a match for the WWE World Tag Team titles, the team of Awesome Truth of R-Truth and The Miz will be defending the WWE World Tag Team titles against DIY of Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. In another tag team match, the New Day of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods take on the Imperium duo of Ludwig Kaiser and Giovanni Vinci. Shinsuke Nakamura takes on Sheamus. JD McDonough and Santos Escobar, representing Legado del Fantasma, will be taking on the team of Andrade and Ricochet. And then in a battle royal to crown the WWE Women's World Title, as it had been recently, it was vacated last week by Rhea Ripley after she suffered a legit shoulder injury. You have participating in that battle royal including Natalya, Becky Lynch, Candice LeRae, Piper Niven, Nia Jax, Zoe Stark, Chelsea Green, Shayna Baszler, Liv Morgan, Indy Hartwell, Katana Chance, Kaden Carter, Ivy Nile, and Maxine Dupree. So there you go. So that's all we got for the wrestling wrap up. But with that, I hope everybody. So now, we will now do the This Day in Each History segment. Today being Monday, April 22nd, 2022, or 2024 rather. Take a look back at this day in each history. History! All right. So first up, we're going to head back 80 years ago today. As on this date, 80 years ago today, back in 1944, following shorts premiered in movie theaters on this date back in 1944, as the Woody Woodpecker short, The Barber of Seville, which was an adaptation of the Barber of Seville opera by Walter Lantz Productions, not to be confused, of course, with the Looney Tunes adaptation. But Woody Woodpecker short, The Barber of Seville, premiered in movie theaters on this date, as well as Fritz Freeling's Bugs Bunny short, Nips and Nip, or the Bugs Bunny short, Bugs Bunny Nips and Nips, which was a war propaganda cartoon at the time, in which Bugs Bunny fights the Imperial Japanese Army, from Warner Brothers Animation. So on this date, the Barber of Seville, Woody Woodpecker short, Barber of Seville from Walter Lantz Productions, and the Warner Brothers Animation short, Bugs Bunny Nips and Nips, both premiered on this date in movie theaters on this date back in 1944, 80 years ago today.
Cool.
So
we hit
that,
1944 twice. It was just so nice. We hit it twice without leaving the same page.
Two things just happened on the same. Two releases just happened on the same day there. So with
we
that,
got a twofer.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have another double in a little while here. You'll see when we get there. Anyways, moving ahead to 1964. On this date in 1964, in of course Los Angeles, here in LA, out here in LA, Dick the Bruiser wins the Worldwide Wrestling Associates World Heavyweight Tournament from Freddie Blassie in Los Angeles, California. This title change is also the starting point of Bruiser's reign as the first World Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship in Indiana upon the promotion start later that year. So 1964, Dick the Bruiser, who was a regular throughout the Midwest territorial scene. In 1964, he would later start up the World Wrestling Association. He would win the Worldwide Wrestling Associates world title out here in LA, and then just take it with him to Indianapolis later in the year. Would be technically classified as the first WWA world or that version of the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. So 60 years ago today, Dick the Bruiser would become the worldwide Wrestling Associate World Heavyweight Champion, and also with that becoming the first World Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Champion. Try saying that 3 times fast, people. Anyways, getting ready to move on to the next piece of niche history here. Moving ahead to 2009, on this date in 2009, the 20th issue of Angel from IDW. The Angel, this comic was based on the character Angel from the Buffy series. Went on sale on the
probably also his own TV series, because Angel did get his own TV series.
Right. So, anyways, on this date back in 2009, 15 years ago today, Angel, the 20th issue of Angel, went on sale on newsstand. Sold for $3.99. Was 32 pages. Written by Kelly Armstrong with art by David Ross and George Freeman. Lettering done by Neil Uvik, and colored by Charlie Kirchhoff and Brian Miller. And 2009 is just so nice that we are going to hit it
twice.
Yep. And also on this date in 2009, the second Gurren Lagann movie premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 2009. On this date, 15 years ago today, the Gainax's Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann movie 2, Lagann Hen, premiered in Japanese theaters on this date 15 years ago. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We had a pretty good discussion over on that one article that we did. So before we go, Rick, would you like to do an outro?
Just go. So if you don't know who I am, Rick Piper of Cross Comics. Look Cross Comics up on YouTube, and go subscribe, and watch whatever I put up.
All right. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. And I know Tim left us a while ago, but I'll send him the link tomorrow. With that, I thank everybody for being here. And with that, I shall see you all tomorrow. Bye.
It's only a tale.